They begged the stars for mercy. What came instead was us. The signal burned through a dozen dying satellites. Before it reached the black edge of Terran space, a pulse of static desperation and an alien tongue. For 47 seconds, the galaxy cried for help, and Earth, long buried in myth and radioactive ash, answered. Commander Idris Harlan stood alone in the observation cradle of the Vengeance-class cruiser Karen, a silent god wrapped in steel, staring into the unlit void beyond the forward shield. His face was carved from war, sharp, angular, bearing the soot-stained creases of a man who had never truly slept since the fall of the cradle. The Earthborn bore their past like scars. The rest of the galaxy only remembered rumors. Behind him, a flicker of light swept the command deck. The holographic brief replayed the message again. Weak, broken, and trembling. This is the Velatari remnant. Please, if any stars still burn, they are harvesting us. The nihilists have returned. We are unarmed. They are static. Then nothing. The last line had haunted Idris since the decrypt first flickered through the bridge. They are hollowed worlds to feed on fear. The Velatari were not allies, not even acquaintances. They were distant, cold-blooded, and known for signing treaties with plasma rifles. A century ago, they'd observed humanity's collapse from a safe orbital distance and turned away, just like everyone else. But the distress signal wasn't directed at allies. It was broadcast blindly into the dark, sent to any civilization cruel or mad enough to respond. And humanity, what remained of it, was both. The last human fleet had no capital, no standing army, no Earth, but it had fire. The Cairn was one of 50 ships that now drifted beyond the Oort wall, cloaked beneath the gravity shadow of a frozen rogue planet. Old Earth's last survivors, engineers from Europa, biowarfare remnants from Mars, and Deathworlders from Titan's underground vaults, had learned silence for decades. Humanity had vanished from galactic charts, buried by alien historians, who wanted to believe the predators had all died off, but something primal had endured. A fury born not from revenge, but from memory. Harlan turned as the side hatch hissed open. Alara Ken stepped onto the deck, her void-gray uniform streaked with oil and frost. Her prosthetic eye glinted faintly in the deck lights, a gift from the siege of Station K-47. She wasn't a soldier by birth. Few of them were. She had once designed orbital habitats for peaceful species. Now she built weapons that melted them. Response, Commander, she asked, voice low, unreadable. None. He replied, our message was received. The Velatari are evacuating moon by moon. But they never asked what the cost would be. They think we're here to save them. Idris gave a slow nod. They'll learn soon enough. She approached the central display, where the vector overlays lit up one by one. Nihilith hives, 6 known in system, each housed in the decaying cores of planets they had already consumed. Psychic weaponry, hive intelligences, impossible to reason with, too ancient to bribe. They hunted terror like biomass. We're 30 hours out, Alara muttered. First strike planned for orbital dusk on Velator Prime. And the Velatari Council, Idris asked, still transmitting pacification requests. They don't believe we'll fire without formal agreement. Idris stepped forward and shut the comms window. They're wrong. Idris Harlan had been 9 years old when Earth burned. He remembered the way the sky turned black, not from fire, but from alien dread ships blotting out the sun. He remembered the screams through the ventilation shaft. He remembered the silence afterward. And he remembered what his mother whispered just before the blast door sealed her behind it. Don't forget what they did. One day, they'll call for help, and you'll be the one who answers. He had never forgotten. Now, standing on the edge of Velatari space, Idris watched as a long-dead world spun slowly below them, already half-covered in growing patches of biomechanical corruption. The nihilists didn't wage war. They infected reality. They burrowed into thoughts, peeled civilizations from their dreams, and fed on the ruin left behind. They hadn't met humans in battle for over a century. That was about to change. All ships, Idris said, turning to his officers, unlock targeting arrays, begin Phase 1 burn. I want a line of fire so bright it carves its name into their nightmares. Alara's lips curled into a grim smile. What name should we give it? Idris didn't blink. Earth. The deck lights dimmed. The war alarms chimed low, steady, a heartbeat echoing through steel bones. Outside, dozens of human-made monstrosities emerged from their frozen hide, each ship older than memory, each crew forged in the black eyes of extinction. From above, it must have looked like ghosts crawling from the void. And then, silence, a moment suspended in ancient vengeance. Then, ignition, engines roared, hulls howled, and humanity began its descent, not as saviors, but as a reckoning. They had no voices, only frequencies, no eyes, only tendrils of thought. The nihilists did not conquer, they converted. When the first human plasma salvo struck Velator Prime's upper orbit, it didn't detonate like the Velatari expected. It bloomed, slow, deliberate, and precise. A white-hot lattice of energy carved through the orbiting infection, tearing apart the hive shell that had spread across the Velatari's moon-like orbital ring. It didn't just burn, it cleansed. Down below, on the planet's surface, billions watched in horror and awe as streaks of unnatural lightning danced through the stratosphere, human weaponry tearing into the sky like a message written in fire. The Velatari did not celebrate. They stared upward, because something else stared back. The nihilist hive minds had sensed humanity the moment the fleet entered the system. Thoughts aren't hidden from them. Fear echoes. Regret leaves scent trails in the subspace lattice. And Idris Harlan, burned, bitter, unbroken, was loud. From beneath the cracked crust of Velatar's moon, a fissure tore open. What emerged didn't match any known records. The thing was awake, a serpentine void form, draped in a carapace of harvested memories, shimmered into the high orbit. Tendrils of psionic energy lashed across magnetic fields, scanning, searching. The nihilith didn't roar or posture. It whispered, across calms, through holes, into minds. Return to ash, progeny of grief. Your extinction was signed in fire. We remember your screams. On the Karen. Alarican clutched the railing as the psychic pressure rippled across the bridge like a solar wave. Her vision blurred. Voices bled through static. She gritted her teeth, blood trickling from one ear. Idris stood motionless. His voice was like iron drawn from Earth's core. Shield all decks. Root echoes through no relays. Prepare counter-chant resonance in 30. One of the junior officers, barely more than a cadet, gasped, "Commander, that thing, it's not just broadcasting, it's feeding on our responses. That's what they do." Idris growled. "They read your fear like scripture. They rewrite your will. And us," Alara rasped, steadying herself. Idris turned. "We unwrite them 50 years ago." Humanity discovered the one weakness of psionic predators, silence, but not the silence of peace, the silence of resolve. Human crews had trained for it, lived it. Their ships carried no personal chatter once in combat range. Their minds had learned how to anchor pain, guilt, and rage, not suppress them, but forge them into blades. They turned trauma into weapons. Idris's mind was a fortress of scars. Every memory was a weaponized wall. He walked the bridge slowly now, ensuring the crew held fast. The Nihilith were beginning their first counterstrike, orbital mine lash. Pulses were tearing through the Velatari's evacuation ships. 3 vessels were already adrift, their crews now screaming vessels of psychic infestation. "Put them out of their misery," Idris ordered, without flinching. Alara gave the silent nod, a reflex born from years of surviving extinction zones. A second later, human torpedoes turned the drifting Velatari ships into brilliant, soundless flowers of flame. And then came the real blow. At 0407 standard Velatari time, the Nihilith revealed their new evolution. 16 hive beasts emerged from the planet's core, not crawling, rising. Each was unlike the next. Fractal limbs, rotating bone matter, crystalline nerve clusters grown from the grief of their victims. They had fed well, not just on the Velatari, on others. Alara's voice shook. "These constructs, Idris, some of this tissue is human." The command deck fell deathly still. A flashback hit Idris like a warhammer. He saw the surface of Europa again. The last colony before silence. A colony where the last 5,000 Terrans tried to rebuild. A colony where the Nihilists appeared without warning. No war. No explosions. Just a stillness, and then emptiness. He had never found their bodies until now. "Then this is justice," he whispered. "Target them all. No survivors." But the Nihilists had plans of their own. As the Karen charged its fusion lances, a psychic burst cracked through the fleet's outer formation. The Eidolon, humanity's stealth carrier, was ripped apart not by weapons, but by despair. The ship's entire AI neural core overloaded, unable to parse the flood of grief forced into its memory logs. The human crew collapsed with it, not dead, but broken, empty, whispering in sleep. The Karen received the death signal just moments later. They showed us home. They took it back. We saw Earth again. Commander, it was beautiful. Then silence. A tactical officer slammed her fist into the console. They used our own hope as a weapon. Idris didn't yell. He didn't move. He simply stared at the growing formation of Nihilith monstrosities aligning themselves into a gravitational web around Velator Prime. They weren't just defending the hive. They were preparing a harvest. Alara, he said quietly, we're not enough. I know. We'll need to awaken the deep engine. She paled. That protocol hasn't been touched in, I know. A pause. Then Alara nodded. Her voice calm as ice. We'll need volunteers. Half won't come back. Idris Highland finally looked down at the planet below, his expression hollow, but resolved. They knew the risks. We all did. Far below, the Velatari Council huddled in bunkers, trying to broadcast surrender codes. But the Nihilists weren't listening, and high above, the Deathworlders, forged from ash, tempered by agony, began unlocking a secret weapon built from humanity's final, forbidden science, not to save the Velatari, but to punish the void. We weren't built to survive. We were built to endure and make the stars remember why. The air inside the Karen's lower decks turned metallic, dense with ozone, heat, and silence. Deck 13, sealed for 27 years, shuddered. As the cryo seals cracked, lights flickered to life down the long, hollow corridor where no crew dared walk. Alara Kim moved first. Her boots echoed alone. Behind her, 24 volunteers stood in silent rows, not soldiers, not engineers, keepers, the last chosen to guard what should never be awakened. The door read, DEP Unit 09, if we open this, we have already lost, and yet they open it. The deep engine wasn't a weapon, it was a promise, born in the final days of Earth's fall. The DEP, Deep Engine Protocol, was humanity's last defiance, a cognitive lattice superintelligence bound in human trauma and AI architecture, not designed to win wars, designed to change them. When Alara entered the core chamber, she felt the hum before she heard it, a low, predatory purr of a machine half awake. The air smelled of cold ash and copper. At the center stood a pillar of dark glass wrapped in memory filaments and haptic anchors, glowing with the heartbeat of something alive. Inside it was no AI. Inside was the uploaded consciousness of the first Resistance Prime, Milavos, Earth's final strategist, the woman who detonated Lunar rather than let the Nihilists take it. Begin neural wake, Alara said, voice steady. The technician at her side hesitated. If we do this, there's no going back. The fleet will lose override control. Alara nodded. She knew that. She wanted that. Open the gate. A moment passed. Then another. The deep engine stirred. Query received. Tactical, activation level 1. Do you seek retaliation, resurrection, or revelation? Alara stepped forward. Her voice shook. All of them. Above. The Karen's bridge flickered as the ship's AI rerouted systems to deep engine control. Idris Harlan didn't need to ask. He felt it. The ship's hum changed. Weapons systems recalibrated themselves without instruction. Threat matrices drew conclusions faster than any human mind could follow, and in Idris's mind, he felt something. Reached back, a whisper not from the void, but from Earth. A voice like war songs through broken radios. Hello, Commander. It's been a while. He hadn't heard Milavos's voice since the fall of Europa. God help us, he muttered. They really brought you back. No gods left, Commander, just us and vengeance. Within minutes, Karen's fleet-wide data stream synchronized. The deep engine didn't just issue orders, it taught. Every crew member felt it. Tactical awareness sharpened. Trauma stabilized, even adrenaline levels tuned through subdermal. Mods, they weren't a fleet anymore. They were a strike nerve. And they struck first. 3 Nihilith constructs attempted to entrap the heavy destroyer Pirewake in a gravitational snare net. Under normal protocols, the ship would have been torn into quantum foam. Instead, under the deep engine's logic, the crew did the unthinkable. They let it happen long enough to charge an overdrive reactor pulse and exploded inside the snare. The implosion took all 3 hive constructs with it. 20 of the humans died, but thousands of Nihilith fragments vanished with them. Martyr code maneuvers. No other species dared write doctrines like this. On Velator Prime, the Velatari watched from their bunkers, no longer transmitting messages of surrender. now simply watching their sky burn. The Deathworlders moved like ghosts, their ships flashing in and out of dark space skips, to fast, to erratic, to human. They struck not at targets, but at weaknesses in intent. They shattered hive logic like a hammer against glass, even. The Nihilith began to hesitate, and then something impossible happened. The Velatary's High Council chamber received a message, not a warning, not a demand, a transmission, clean, direct, and unmistakably human. Idris Harlan's voice. To the Velatari Council, you were not our allies. You left Earth to burn. You watched us fall and erased us from your histories, but we are not here for you. We are here because you sent an SOS, and we never ignore the call. The last line was quieter, meant for more than them. The galaxy forgot us. Now, it will remember. That same hour, the deep engine discovered a pattern, a weakness, in the hive's psionic pulse frequencies. They were operating on a recursion model, feedback loops from the minds they harvested. The more the Nihilists fed on terror, the more predictable their signal rhythm became. And humans were unpredictable. Send the ghosts, Idris ordered. The ghost fleet, unmanned ships loaded with false crew patterns, psychological, war bombs and memory-laced noise launched into high orbit. They broadcast fragments of laughter, screams, lullabies from Earth's last days. The Nihilists lunged at them and were ambushed mid-feed by counter-resonance blasts. That fractured their minds. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Nihilith hive screamed and retreated, back on the cairn. Idris stood silently as the combat data scrolled across the holomap. 1/3 of the Velator system was purged, the rest now fractured into conflict zones. Humanity had done in 6 hours what 3 Velatari defense fleets couldn't manage in 6 years. But this wasn't victory, it was the spark. Alara approached, sweat dripping from her temple. We've proven we can hurt them. Idris didn't. Smile. That's not enough. We have to prove we can end them. Behind him, the deep engine whispered again, almost fondly, that we write their extinction in fire. They didn't retreat. They recalculated and brought hell with them. The Velator system bled light. What was once an elegant network of crystalline satellites and orbital cities had become a shattered graveyard lit by flickering wreckage. The human fleet held position at high orbital altitude, silent, steel and fury waiting in formation. Then, on the 7th hour after deep engine activation, the void shifted. No sensors registered movement. No radar pinged, but every human aboard. The fleet felt it in their bones, that prickle behind the eyes. The drop in pressure that came before a storm. From the black between stars, they returned. 3 Nihilith dreadforms emerged first. They were larger than anything in prior records, constructs shaped like hollow moons. Fractal limbs folding and unfolding like wings of frozen time. Each one carried a lattice of enslaved neural nodes, alien minds still alive, still screaming. The deep engine immediately issued a warning. Pattern anomaly. High mass reformation detected. Cross-species neural compression. Estimated threat multiplier. Unknown. On the cairn. Alarms rose to full combat pitch. Idris Harlan didn't wait for consensus. Bring us about. Weapons hot. Engaged with saturation fire. As the fleet repositioned, the sky erupted. A wave of dark energy lashed from the lead dreadform, folding space itself into blades of entropy. One Terran cruiser, the Ash Widow, was bisected cleanly. Its reactor collapsed in on itself in a silent, radiant implosion. Another destroyer, Scorn Light, lost half its crew to a mass psychic hemorrhage. Those who survived reported flashes of false memory. Earth is a paradise, their families alive and smiling. False. Weaponized nostalgia. Alara Ken slammed her hand against the comms panel. They've adapted. They're using our minds against us now. Not fear, love. Twist the blade, Idris growled. Of course they would. He stared out the forward viewport as another hive form unfolded, this one smaller, shaped like a coiling sea serpent, covered in mirror-like plating. And then it spoke, not in thought, in English. You should not have come back, children. Of ash, Earth was your grave. You are trespassers on your own extinction. The words weren't synthesized. They were remembered. A perfect mimicry of Mila Voss's voice from a 72-year-old broadcast. The deep engine fell silent. For 3 seconds, no order came. Alara's breath caught. They're inside her code. No. Idris whispered. They're baiting her, testing whether she still feels. Mila. He muttered. Don't give them what they want. The deep engine answered coldly. Emotional redundancy burned. Fear response, irrelevant. Countermeasure initiated. The sky exploded in tactical chaos. The human fleet dispersed, not retreating, but fracturing. Slipping into randomized dark space flickers across multiple gravitational axes, every ship followed a unique deep engine-determined vector, impossible to predict. The dreadforms opened fire. Beams of folded entropy lancing through the void, but most passed harmlessly into vacuum. Only phantom after images remained. Idris's voice rang through the fleet. They think we're a species that fights to live. Show them what it means to fight for the dead. Humanity struck with everything. Kinetic impalers slammed into high flesh with hypervelocity force. Resonant EMPs laced with emotional disruptors. Laughter, grief, lullabies saturated the psionic spectrum, frying hive nerves. Flameburst torpedoes burst into white phosphor in the atmosphere of Velatars. Upper sky, turning the clouds into memory-haunted infernos. And still the nihilists advanced. On deck 13 of the Karen, Alara watched the casualty list streaming. 7 ships lost. For inoperable. Hundreds dead, some by weapons, some by thoughts alone. But it was the names that gutted her. Cruci, trained, friends who had sung Earth's last anthem together, people who had believed. And then came the message from the Grey Wind, a gunship disabled near Velatar's second moon. They breached through comms. We saw our families. They made. US feel safe. We're venting now. I think it's better this way. Commander, if we fall, make them remember. Alara collapsed into her chair, fist clenched. Her eyes stung. Idris, we can't hold this. No, he said, quietly, but we can make it cost. A new alert rang across the fleet. Not an enemy signal, a human transmission, origin, Earth. But Earth was dead. The bridge darkened as the signal parsed. It was low-band, analog, a bouncing pulse buried in old navigation rays, impossible. Then the voice came through, rough and aged, but unmistakably Terran. To any survivors, this is Relay Station Echo 7, buried beneath Olympus Mints. Old Mars, deep core emergency beacon still active. You are not alone. Repeat, you are not alone. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Idris smiled, not with joy, but with something older, more dangerous, hope. Deep engine, he said. Plot a gravity-fold corridor. If Mars is speaking again, we may still have cards to play. Confirmed, came Mila's voice. Suggest delay of enemy hive assimilation by 14 minutes. Alara looked over. You have a plan? Idris didn't answer directly. He turned back to the display of the incoming dreadforms. One now peeling apart Velatar's lower orbit into a spiral maw of gravitational inversion. They wanted us to vanish, to be forgotten. But we left echoes in every stone, every ruin, every relay tower. He paused. Now we turn our ghosts into guns. And far below, the Velatari began to rise from their bunkers, not to fight, but to witness. The Deathworlders weren't like them. They didn't cry for salvation. They became it. The battle was not going well, but it wasn't over, not by a long shot. We thought the grave of Earth was silent, but it was only sleeping, and now it remembers us. They said Olympus Mints was cold. They had no idea. Beneath the ancient Martian volcano, inside a forgotten emergency station buried in basalt, at Fireglass, a pulse of light ignited for the first time in 72 years. The deep engine had traced the analog signal from Relay Echo 7, a deep core cache last logged in humanity's final year. It had gone silent days before the Nihilith wiped out the Martian exodus. Fleet, thought lost, entombed, but now it spoke again, and what it carried would change everything on board the Karen. The lights dimmed as the data streamed in. Alara Kent stood beside the main holo emitter, her hands trembling as a ghostly waveform resolved into form. Welcome back, Earthburn. The voice said. The figure was a hollow sim frame, faded and glitching, of a woman in a United Terran Science. Core's uniform, older, eyes sunken with resolve. This is Dr. Narasora, Exocognitive Research Lead, Mars Subcore Theta Zero. If you're seeing this, it means we failed to stop them, but it also means we're not truly gone. I left something buried in the lattice, a weapon, but not one, of steel. It's memory, raw, uncompressed, unfiltered, human emotional frequency, encoded and weaponized. It's us, our stories, our pain, our defiance. The holo shook violently, static ripping through the recording. Then one last fragment broke through. Feed it to the hive. Let them choke on what they harvested. Silence. Then the deep engine's voice pulsed through the deck. Mars' memory cache contains over 7 terahertz of compressed psychic imprint data. Survivors' last moments, final transmissions, pre-collapse recordings, all intact. Idris Harlot's face was pale, hard, loaded into the core disruptors. Alara blinked. You want to fire human memory at them? Idris nodded slowly. They used it as bait, as poison. Now we give it back, pure, undiluted, not as illusion, but as truth. Alara exhaled. They won't be able to process it. They'll try. He turned toward the forward viewport. The largest Nihilith dread form was coiling now, preparing the system-wide psionic field collapse, the kind that would shred every conscious mind in range. They think we're afraid of remembering. He said, let's show them what happens when we refuse to forget. Minutes later, across the fleet, warheads were retrofitted, but these weren't. Nuclear, not plasma, not kinetic. They were archives. Encoded in the cores were final logs from Earth, children singing in shelters, soldiers laughing between bombardments, mothers whispering lullabies as fire rained from orbit. Rage, hope, sorrow, love, every human emotion the Nihilith had tried to distort, now given form. They called them echo warheads, and they were aimed directly at the hive. At 1600 hours Velatari time, the human fleet launched the first barrage. They didn't explode, they played. Voices spilled through the system like thunder over a desert. This is Captain Arlen Voss, Lunar Defense Grid. If you're hearing this, I stayed behind. Tell my son I kept the sky clean. They came from the dark, but we had each other. That's what they couldn't kill. My name is Ida. I was 6. I like stars. Over and over, memory, real, raw. The effect was immediate. The Nihilith dread form began to fracture. One of its outer shell lobes snapped free. Spiraling uncontrollably, its psychic lances sputtered. A scream, not heard but felt, rippled through the system. They weren't just overloaded, they were drowning. The deep engine confirmed, hive structure failing to compartmentalize data. Feedback loops accelerating, emotional resonance breaching core cognition. But there was a price. On board the Verdict of Flame, one of the secondary cruisers, a warhead misfired and discharged inside the ship's own psionic dampener grid. The crew was exposed to their own history. Captain Tolan bled from the nose as his calms choked out a final message. We saw them, our ancestors, the ones who never made it off-world. They looked at us and said, fight harder, so we will. The ship rammed one of the collapsing dreadforms moments later. Mutual annihilation. Alara gripped the edge of the command table, knuckles white. Idris, how many are we going to lose? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, his gaze locked onto a single trajectory on the holomap, a new gravitational anomaly forming behind the hive. Something massive, something moving. The deep engine spoke before he could. Warning, new hive form detected. Planet killer class. Psionic pulse amplitude exceeding survivable limits. Idris's jaw tightened. They're pulling everything. They're scared. Alara said, we hurt them. Not enough. He stepped forward, spine straight as iron. Order all remaining ships into burn order Delta. We go full assault. That's a suicide run. No, he said. It's the next chapter. Across the system, Deathworlders ships peel into formation, old, cracked hulls. Crews who no longer dreamed of victory, only of being remembered correctly. And from the wreckage of the Ash Widow, a miracle, a life pod drifting inside a survivor. A girl no older than 20, skin burned, eyes clear. Her voice, when they opened the channel, shook the fleet to its core. You came, Earth answered. Then, make them pay. The sky grew darker. The final hive form began to unfold. A nightmarish mass of tendrils and memory scars larger than moons. But in the center of it all, the voice of humanity rose, old, broken, unyielding, as the fleet charged toward annihilation. They had the numbers, the power, the stars themselves. But we had nothing left to lose and everything left to prove from orbit. The final Nihilith hive form looked like a wound torn across space. A writhing vortex of nerve towers, thought flesh, and half-digested civilizations. It grew by feeding on memory, converting species into living architecture, and it was still hungry. At its core pulsed a consciousness so vast it warped gravity by will alone. The deep engine had no name for it, only a designation, High Mind Prime, Nihilith Godseed, Psionic Devourer. Its arrival had silenced all remaining Velatari channels. The system choked beneath its psionic storm, but the human fleet did not run, they burned. All ships, Idris Harlan said, voice raw over fleet-wide comms. You've seen what's coming. You've buried friends. You've heard the screams. He paused, staring at the ever-growing silhouette beyond the viewport. This isn't for Earth. Earth is gone. This is for every scream they tried to bury in static. For every name they wiped from history. He turned. And if this is our last charge, then we carve our truth so deep into the stars, even extinction won't forget. A dozen captains responded at once. Burn Order Delta confirmed. This is the Hell's Grief. We're with you. We will not be erased again. The Deathworlders formed a spearhead. The cairn at its tip, glowing with the twin resonance. Cores of vengeance and memory. Behind it, crippled ships rearmed into battering rams. Old stealth vessels ran with reactor doors open, no longer hiding, but daring the void to see them. The plan was simple. Break the hive. Feed it too much. Make it choke on the one thing it can't metabolize, us. The deep engine broadcast. The final payloads. Echo warheads loaded. Psionic cascade vectors aligned. Emotional saturation at critical levels. Idris's eyes narrowed. Fire all memory banks. They didn't launch missiles. They launched us across the black. The air rippled with sound that had no medium, pure memory. Earth's death. Mars's last lullaby. Europa's final transmission. We remember. We endured. We never stopped. The Nihilith Godseed shrieked, not in pain, but rage. The overload began fracturing its outer tendrils. Hive limbs recoiled. A defensive psionic field lashed outward, slicing the human frigates clean in half. But still the fleet advanced. The cairn took a direct hit across decks 3 through 9. Bulkheads ruptured. Fire consumed entire hangar bays. Still, Idris stood on the bridge, refusing to fall. His voice hoarse. Deep engine. Status. Core containment holding. Casualty count rising. Resonance impact effective. Alara Ken slammed her hand. On the control panel. It's working. We're saturating them. And then the Godseed struck back. A psionic pulse, larger than anything recorded in Terran history, detonated across the fleet. The stars shattered, not literally, but perceptually. Human minds were torn open. Dreams and memories mixed. Some screamed. Some went quiet. On the cairn, the lights died. The bridge plunged into black. Alara fell to her knees, blood dripping from her nose, eyes wide, seeing her sister again. A girl who died in Europa's fall. Idris staggered back, gripping the rail, blinking, into a flood of noise that wasn't noise at all. Voices, laughter, regret. Come home, rest, forget. The Nihilist's final weapon, peace, not horror, not rage, but the seductive numbness of letting go. And for a moment, the Deathworlders began to fall, until one voice cut through it all. Not the deep engine, not Idris. A girl, the lone survivor recovered from the wreck of the Ash Widow. Her pod had been silent. Until now, she broadcast across the emergency channel, unshielded, defiant. You don't get to have my brother's face. You don't get to wear my mother's voice. You didn't save us. We saved ourselves. Silence. And then, my name is Sarah Wren. I was born in the dark. I saw Earth in a picture book, and I choose to fight. The deep engine stabilized. The pulse broke. Across the fleet, stunned crews rose again, and the cairn's lights flared back to life. Idris stood tall once more. Mala. He whispered to the deep engine, open the core. We do it now. The final protocol engaged. Deck 13 detonated inward, revealing the deep engine's true form, a singularity caged in Terran neural lattice, forged of AI code and grief. A quantum memory bomb, built not to kill the enemy, but to force them to feel. It had never been fired, until now. Target locked, the engine confirmed. Hive Prime within kill radius. This is your species' last question. Do they deserve to understand what they've done? Idris closed his eyes. He saw his mother, Europa burning. His crew, Syrah. He whispered, make them remember. The core fired, not with light, with emotion. 75 years of human memory, weaponized into a psychic scream, struck the Godseed like a thunderclap across eternity. The hive staggered, cracked, and for the first time in galactic history, it wept. No translation, no calms, just the hollow, shivering echo of something that had never felt regret breaking open. The Deathworlders pressed in, final weapons deployed, and Idris Harlan, bleeding, broken, still standing at the edge of the abyss, gave the last order. Let them see who we are, and the galaxy did. There are wars you win, and there are wars you end. We came to end this, or be remembered trying. The Godseed was screaming, the hot form writhed above Velator Prime, its tendrils of thought breaking apart under the emotional overload surging through its core. What was once a flawless psionic engine, a predator of memory, identity, and soul, now buckled under the unbearable weight of understanding. Billions of harvested minds, human and alien, long buried and repurposed inside its matrix, surged back, not as data, not as fuel, as voices. We were children once. We built things. We dreamed. You took everything. On board the Karen, Idris Harlan coughed blood as sparks rained from above. His uniform was torn, a long burn trailing down his ribs, but he hadn't moved from the bridge. Couldn't. This was it. Status, he rasped. Alara Kent stood behind him, barely able to stay upright. Her voice trembled through a damaged calm. Godseed's outer shell is collapsing. Memory overload is accelerating psionic decay. The deep engine is still pushing resonance. She paused, but it's breaking itself apart doing it. The deep engine's voice echoed, distorted now, not mechanical, but tired, memory core fracturing, thread limit exceeded, consensus collapsing, but the high feels. Elara's voice cracked. Mila, don't do this. Pull back. Too late. The lattice is fused. I am the payload now. Idris didn't argue. He stepped toward the forward viewport, hand resting on the cracked glass. And for one long second, he saw it. The Godseed, so impossibly massive, so cruel, splitting open like a flower made of scars, tendrils folding inward, the harvested souls singing from within. Fragments of earth-born songs woven into the storm, and beyond it, stars shining down as if they were watching. It's listening. Idris whispered. It's dying. Alara corrected. No, he said quietly. It's being born into something it doesn't understand. He turned to the comm. All ships. This is the final call. Across the fleet, battered and bloody Deathworlders lifted their heads as Idris's voice rang out. Ragged, raw, but unbroken. They came to erase us, rewrite us, break us. But we are not data. We are not patterns. We are human. And when the void reached into our graves to silence our stories, we answered with fire. The deep engine's voice crackled in reply. Its last emotion. Delivered, enemy, disarmed. Humanity, remembered. And then it went dark. The Godseed spasmed, no longer a mind, no longer a machine. And from deep inside it came a pulse unlike any before. Not a weapon, not a signal, a confession, a low, sonorous echo that touched every mind in the Velator system, Velatari, human, and Nihilith remnant alike. What are you? And Idris answered, not with fury, not with vengeance, but with truth. We're what happens when you push something too far and it refuses to die. We are the ones who crawl out of extinction with blood in our mouths and stars in our eyes. We are the children of a dead world, and we do not go quietly. The Godseed collapsed, not in flame, but in release. Tendrils broke off and fell into themselves. Neural filaments liquefied into clouds of free memory. One by one, the hive lights dimmed until only a hollow shell remained, a ruined monument to arrogance undone by empathy. And in its place, silence, pure, terrifying, beautiful. The Deathworlders floated in its wake, guns still hot, whole scarred, hearts broken but alive. A single broadcast crackled from a Velatari outpost bunker below. They did it. The humans. They did it. Then came another, and another. Aliens who once mocked them, feared them, forgot them, now saluted them. Later, in the stillness that followed, the remaining fleet gathered in formation. Only 7 ships remained intact, 3 barely flightworthy. The Karen drifted near the wreck of the deep engine's core, now nothing but silent crystal, debris orbiting the ruined Godseed. Idris stood alone on the bridge, watching it spin. Alara approached slowly, face hollowed by grief and awe. She gave everything. She was everything, Idris replied. He reached into his coat, pulled out a fragment of an old Earth flag, sun-bleached, burned along the edges. He placed it on the bridge console and activated the final beacon, a simple transmission. No demand, no warning, just a line of truth. The SOS wasn't ignored, and this is what answered. In the outer fringe systems, The message spread like fire among the fractured remnants of old alliances, in war-torn exile fleets, in the minds of enemies who had once mocked the Deathworlders as savages. A realization dawned. Humanity had not just survived, they had won, not by erasing the enemy, but by making them remember, by burning their story into the bones of the stars, and somewhere, deep in the debris field that used to be the Godseed, a final spark pulsed in silence, a single name, Malavos. We came from ash, we gave them fire, and when the stars cleared, they remembered our name. The Velator system hung silent, as if even the cosmos held its breath. Where once the Nihilith hive loomed, eternal, invincible, all-consuming, now there drifted only ruin. Shattered fragments of psionic lattice glimmered like black snow, and echoes of fractured thought whispered through cold vacuum, harmless now. The Godseed was gone, and with it, so was the war. The Deathworlders had done what no empire, no council, no alliance had achieved in 1,000 years. They had ended it. The Karen limped through low orbit above Velator Prime, its hull a patchwork of carbon scoring and salvage plating. Inside, the last surviving crew patched cables, rationed oxygen, and whispered the names of the fallen into the ship's central archive, their version of a memorial. Elara Ken sat at a viewport, eyes fixed on the debris field where the deep engine's core had once pulsed with cold vengeance. She didn't leave a backup, she said quietly. Idris Harlan stood beside her, arms folded, face like carved obsidian. She was the backup, he answered, the contingency of last resort. There was no ceremony, no funeral. Malavos had fused her code, her consciousness, and all that remained of old Earth into one final, impossible act, making the enemy feel, and the galaxy would never forget it. 3 days later, the Velatari Council broadcast a system-wide declaration. It wasn't a treaty. It was a confession to the people of Earth, those who live, and those who died before the fire. We were silent when you burned. We were absent when you screamed. We thought you were extinct. We were wrong. Humanity is no longer forgotten. Humanity is feared. Humanity is respected. They ceded the system to human control without contest. No one argued. No one dared. Across the surviving fleet, patchwork signals poured in from all corners of the broken galaxy, from the Heliox sector, where a colony of exiled humans picked up the transmission and wept, from the Orion Drift, where cybernetic resistance fighters painted Terran flags onto their armor, whispering legends of the ghosts who answered the call, from the fractured remains of the Galactic Assembly, silent for decades, now, broadcasting one trembling phrase, the Deathworlders live. On board the Karen, a final message was encoded into the fleet archive, not encrypted, not hidden, a memorial. Alara's voice, steady as stone. We are not what Earth was. We are what Earth became. We are forged from collapse, born of refusal, and baptized in loss. You called us monsters. You feared our anger. But you never understood the thing that made us rise again and again. Long after logic said we should stay down, you thought it was vengeance. It was love. She stepped away from the mic. The ship was quiet. Then a whisper from the recovered survivor, Sarah Wren, barely older than a child, yet carved from the fire of legends. We'll build something new, won't we? Idris looked at her, then out into the stars. Yes, he said, but not to replace what we lost, to honor it. 10 years later, a statue stands in the heart of Velator Prime's capital. It's not of a hero, not of a weapon. It's of a woman, standing tall, eyes closed, one hand outstretched. Crystal shards hover above her palm, memory fragments etched beneath her feet. Malavos, deep engine, memory of Earth. Beneath that, in smaller text, she remembered. So we could be remembered. And beside it, carved in ancient Terran script, a line that no longer needs translation across the galaxy. That day, the stars learned what it means to be human. Somewhere beyond Velator, a transmission crackles to life in deep space. A freighter crew hears it first, then a scavenger rig, then a far-flung colony once thought lost. The same signal every time. A voice, human, quiet, calm, unshakable. This is the Terran remnant, broadcasting on all open frequencies. If you are hurt, if you are hunted, if you are forgotten, you are not alone. We heard the SOS, and we will answer again. End.